We left the magic of New Hampshire and headed south. What lies ahead might be a mile in length, but this is a whole different monster. With high banks and higher speeds, drivers and their crews are getting ready for a battle. They know the carnage this track is capable of. Do you? This is NASCAR Performance, and we'll tell you about it next. Welcome to NASCAR Performance with the chase in full swing. It's hard to contain your excitement this time of year. 2 down with 2 different winners. I have 3 winners with me here tonight. You know them, you love them, you've seen them all year. Larry McReynolds, Chad Knaus, crew chief for the Lowe's 48 Hendrick Chevy.
So who's the third one?
Our special little friend.
Oh, okay.
Jeff Hammond. He is in the NASCAR Performance Tech Center standing by. I think he's doing something with rope. Some rope tricks.
Oh, I can't wait.
This could get very interesting, folks. We're just getting started. And Chad, when we started the chase, you told us 2 weeks ago, it's so important to build a solid foundation, not get yourself out of it in week 1, week 2. You guys have certainly done that with back-to-back finishes.
We have.
Great
We've been
finishes.
very, very happy, thank you, with the performance of the 48 team so far. Obviously, we would like to be just a little bit better, but, you know, quite honestly, in Chicagoland, we had a great race car and everything went well. Rolling into Loudon, you're like, okay, completely different racetrack, different mentality, you have to approach it a little bit differently, and it turned out really good for us as well. So we were clearly not the fastest car there, but I think that it was the 11 car, the 48 car, and then everybody else. So to be a little bit better than the rest of the field and knowing that Saturday night, we knew that. Everybody knew the 11 was going to be fast, and then if you were going to beat him, you would have to beat him on a racing situation. They would have to get caught up in an accident, do a bad pit call, something along those lines, and they didn't. They executed perfectly, and we came up second, and we got some good points, and that's what we wanted to do.
You know, there's the ongoing debate about do we have the right tracks in the chase, and I'm not sure if we've got all the right tracks in the chase, but I do like the way the chase starts off because it's at 4 completely different racetracks. We were at the 1.5-mile track of Chicagoland Speedway, the flat 1 mile at Loudon. We go to another 1-mile track this weekend that has nothing to do with Loudon, High Bank 1 mile at Dover, and then of course the restrictor plate race at Talladega. I like the way this chase starts because to me, with 4 completely different tracks, you kind of really see who the players are early.
And Chad, you talked about Denny Hamlin being the dominant car this past weekend at Loudon. Who had the dominant car the last time we were in Dover?
I think the man standing to my left. He only led 289 of 400 laps.
That's about it.
What happened to the other 111?
Well,
we always got to give you grief, even when you win.
And I'll be honest with you, I wish we could say that we had the fastest car with the 48 car, but honestly we didn't. We had the fastest car for the first portion of the race, the first half of the race, let's say, but I honestly think that the 24 car was the best race car in Dover, but they had some problems. They had a loose wheel. They had to pit about 2/3 of the way through the event, and actually if the caution hadn't come out at the end of the race, the 24 car was going to be the spoiler and trump everybody with the pit strategy because they were actually able to cut that last segment almost directly in half and optimize their tires. But unfortunately for them, the caution fell, and they got caught, and they had to get the wave around. But again, we love going to Dover. I'm excited about it. It's one of my favorite racetracks. It's so much fun, and the best thing about it is Jimmy likes it. So with Jimmy likes it, that always gives us a little bit more spring in his step as we roll into that racetrack.
When the driver's happy, the crew chief is very happy. Chad, tell us some of the keys to dominating the Monster Mile.
Well, I think you have to really pay attention to the racetrack. And over the course of the last few years, you've had to watch because the track has changed. The track surface doesn't really change that much. Obviously, it's concrete, so the rubber doesn't pack into the racetrack, but the tires change. And the way the tire sets on top of the racetrack has changed over the course of the years. We've seen it time and time again. Maybe it's a little bit of a powdery substance, and it puts a big cushion up at the top. Sometimes it just lays the rubber down on the racetrack and really packs it in there and makes it difficult for the drivers to handle. The thing that we've got on our side is, once again, is Jimmy. He can see that, he can feel that, and that's what's really helped us at Dover adjust the race car throughout the course of a race.
And the thing about it, we talk about it being a 1-mile racetrack, and you think that's a big racetrack. Well, it is a big racetrack, but 1 mile, but you probably spend well over half the amount of time in the corners, and the corners are wide. And then the straightaways narrow up, and where we see drivers get in trouble, we saw it about lap 10 there in the spring race, is it narrows up so much as you drive up out of the corner. We actually had the big one in turn 2 on lap 10 that took out almost a dozen cars. That's really the tricky part, I think, of that racetrack, is when you come up out of the hole, up on the straightaway, it just really narrows up, and and the car wants to lunge against the wall, we tend to have cautions there, but like Chad and I was talking before the show, if you go back to the spring race, even with 7 cautions, we still had 2 green flag runs of over 100 laps.
And we would be remiss if we didn't mention Dover and the extremely narrow and tricky pit road.
It is, and we've seen that time and time again, not only from contact after a pit stop or coming into your pit stop, but just trying to get onto pit road itself. We've seen Matt Kenseth, one of the best race car drivers we've got out there, spin out, hit the tires inside there. We've seen guys try to slow down, get to pit road speed, miss the commitment line, have to go back around the racetrack, maybe lose a lap, maybe lose a bunch of time. So it's a very, very tricky pit road. And like I say, it's the whole way out. Even getting back up onto pit road, because the banking on the back straightaway is so steep, it's difficult for the drivers to see what's coming behind them. So it's difficult.
Qualifying will matter when we go racing at the Monster Mile, and since the track doesn't change very much, not unusual for teams to sweep. So, do you guys know who the first driver was to sweep at Dover?
It's written on the teleprompter.
Don't cheat, Larry Mack. I know one of the drivers was your driver, Jimmy Johnson. You guys have actually done it twice.
Yes, we did it in 2002 and I believe in 2009.
In 2009.
Yep.
But the first driver to do it was David Pearson, way back in 1973. Isn't that when Hammond started his racing career?
The only thing I can tell you about Hammond when he was born was when the Dead Sea was just getting sick.
Jeff, Chad and I didn't say it. Just for the record, Larry Mack's the one that threw you under the bus.
That's awesome.
Here we go again, Danielle. But look, you know how you guys always like to give me a hard time about my age? Well, just remember one thing. With history comes knowledge. And folks, when we come back from the break, do I have a history lesson for you?
NASCAR Performance is brought to you by eHarmony.
Hey, welcome back to NASCAR Performance. Now, before we went to break, I was talking to you about a history lesson. Today, well, it's going to be a little bit different, I think, than what you were maybe imagining. When you see this seat sitting here, this is kind of reminiscent of some of the stock car seats that Matt used. This actually came out of a Firebird. Now, today's show is not about the seat, but I want you to understand why we're going to be talking about that, because we're talking about what drivers used to do in the very beginning. I'm talking about back in the early 50s of NASCAR. Drivers used to literally tie themselves inside of a race car because seatbelts were not something that was readily available. Even though it was patented back in the 1900s as far as seatbelts and the availability of them, this wasn't there. So drivers would do whatever they could to be able to make sure that they were, had some way to hold themselves in. It wasn't until like 1963, 64 that the Department of Transportation made it mandatory to have front lap belts in a passenger car. So can you imagine, everybody's kind of running around trying to figure out how to hold themselves inside of a race car. Well, as it progressed along, I'll point this out real quick, that a lot of times the race teams would go to the military and use stuff out of an airplane, out of some of the fighter planes they used to have back in the day, and that was where we got started with some of the restraints that we're using are styled after as far as today's concerned. Let's take a quick look over here. I want to talk about today's safety innovations as far as this car is concerned. We can still see how great the roll cage is. We can see the impact foam that's there. But let's take a look as far as some vehicle safety as far as the driver's cockpit itself is concerned. When you're sitting inside your driver's seat, you want to make sure that you're securely pulled in, not only for the comfort, but for the safety of the fact that you never know when you may wind up having to use a restraint to keep you from flying out of the race car. Man, we're running speeds over 200 miles an hour today, so you want yourself securely pulled down in this race car. Now, we talk a lot about the seats, customized seats, but these restraints are the same way. And you've got to make sure that they're fitted to your driver so they perform correctly and will do their job necessarily in case we have a big event, such as a crash, a rollover, any kind of hard impact. Think about some of the impacts, maybe one like Danica Patrick had earlier this year. Extremely hard impact, but these restraints right here did their job of keeping her securely in this seat so she didn't get a serious injury. They also complement the Hans device. They actually go over the Hans device to help pull those to your shoulder, so your head is also restricted from being able to move. This is part of a package. Now, what we're looking at here, compared to the rope that we showed you a moment ago, is a 6-point harness. If you take a quick look, here's one. This is the first shoulder harness. 2 is the other shoulder harness. We got 2 lap belts also, 3 and 4. These are the leg restraints, 5 and 6. Now, you can imagine when anything's going on, these shoulder harnesses got to hold you securely in the seat along with the lap belts. But a nice addition has been 5 and 6 because they actually kind of wrap around your leg to help hold you back in the seat so you don't slide out in the event of hitting the wall head on like Danica Patrick did. All of this right here is designed to do one thing and one thing only: allow these drivers to walk away from severe crashes. Danielle, why don't you jump back inside the race car over there and show the folks at home how it really works? You got a couple of assistants there that should know how to help you get you basically hooked up.
Thank you, Jeff. I can do you one better. I'm already inside the car, ready to go. I'm a demonstration diva. Boys, where are we going to start?
Or a crash test dummy. You don't know which one it is.
One of the two.
But anyways, we're going to go over this real quick so you guys really understand how the 6-point harness system works, okay? When you look down inside the race car, you can see that Danielle has got the thigh or the crotch belt right there. It's got the 2 straps go down between her thighs, and it actually circles her thigh. It's much, much better than the single sub belt that we used to use. Now, when you hook up the lap belts, just like Danielle did right there on the left side, now she's hooking up the right side. Those are the first things that you want to do. Then you insert the shoulder straps. She's got her left shoulder strap. Wrong part.
Okay.
We're going to do that part right there. There you go. Good job.
There's a lot going on here.
There is a lot there. Perfect. Now do the right one. Awesome. Very good. Okay.
You have to hear it click.
You have to hear it click. Now, the most important part right here as you're going through this is when you start to tighten the belts down. You want to tighten the lap belts evenly to keep the center portion centered in your abdomen. Obviously, you don't want it off to one side because then that could create a pelvic injury if you do get into a frontal impact. Then you take the shoulder straps and you pull the shoulder straps tight. Give them a real good tug, and that gets you pulled down and compressed into the seat. If you happen to get upside down, if something bad happens and you do get a multiple impact, that really keeps you securely fastened into the race car itself.
Yeah, and if a lot of the short track racers are watching this, one thing that we wanted to drive home is you almost can't pull those belts too tight. If you watch NASCAR on Fox from, say, 2003 to about 2009, you would hear me say before Darrell Waltrip went boogity, 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 reach up there and pull those belts tight one more time. Well, we were being a little funny with that, but that's something I would tell my drivers that I worked with for my 18 years as a crew chief before the start of the race and before every restart, because sometimes under caution, the driver would kind of pull his belts and just to give him a little breathing room, and then over the course of a run, they would start to loosen up. You know, even the driver starts sweating and he'd start to loosen up. So you can never, the lap belts or the shoulder harnesses, you can never pull those belts too tight. I always would tell Brandon, pull them till you can't pull them anymore, and then pull them one more time.
And Chad, you say you still tell Jimmy that as part of your routine before every restart.
Yeah, you have to, because I think there's a psyche that goes along with that as well. It gets the driver in the mindset, okay, I'm snuggled in here, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to get aggressive with it. Again, just like what Larry spoke about, you start to lose water weight as the race progresses. So you got to go ahead and take up that slack in the belts, because you do sweat a lot of water out. There's a lot of things that you have to remember throughout the course of the race. The foam in your insert gets indented more, and you set back in the seat a little bit lower. There's a lot of things that contribute to that.
Larry, what are the rules about where these belts are mounted?
Well, that's probably, Danielle, one of the most important things about the belts. Now, the good thing about the carbon seat that most of the Hendrick drivers run is the seat belts are actually part of the seat. They're mounted to the seat itself. But if you use the aluminum seat like the LaJoy seat or the Butler seat, then it has to be mounted to the structure of the race car. The submarine belts are mounted to the seat frame in front of the seat. The lap belts are mounted to the seat frame on the side. And then actually, this bar right here is bar 7 per NASCAR that's called the shoulder bar. You either mount the shoulder harnesses to that bar, or if it's not really the right height for that, you can add a bar called bar 7B, which is actually called the shoulder harness B. But the way the belts are mounted, and they have to be mounted with a bolt and a nut, that's about as important as the integrity of the belts themselves.
You know, one of the things that you have to remember, guys, all these restraints keep the driver really tight, really secure in the race car, but his head can still move around a little bit, or her head can move around a little bit. So in need for some safety for the drivers, what we've done is we've come up with some head and neck restraint systems to try to make it a little bit better. And we're going to get into that here just a little bit more in the next segment.
Well, I'm about ready for a break. Before we get to that next segment, did you see, Chad, what they brought in for dinner tonight? Now, when we come back, we'll show you some of the advancements manufacturers have made with these harnesses. Danielle, don't go anywhere. Can you believe she fell for it again? It must be the blonde hair. I don't know.
Maybe something like that.
Denny Hamlin's on fire.
Jeff Burton's going back to victory lane. Martin Truex Jr. is going to win his first Cup race.
All that was another win on concrete.
Rounds 1 and 2 to the fifth.
Kyle Busch showing him how to tame the monster mile.
Matt Kenseth wins it.
Hell yeah, 22. Woo! God, I love this place.
Welcome back to NASCAR Performance. We're having some fun with a really serious topic. Before the break, Chad Knaus and Larry McReynolds helped strap me inside the car, teaching us about the harness system. Now it's time to talk about the Hans device as well, Chad.
Yeah, it's really important, guys, to make sure that the driver's head is secure inside the race car. The frontal and side impacts that these guys sustain can be very, very damaging to the driver's neck and head and shoulders. So one of the things we talked about just a moment ago was the Hans device. It's very important. The Hans comes over the tops of the shoulders of the driver, over his collarbone, and the helmet actually connects to this. It's a pretty neat system. The helmet sets in like so. Let's pretend this is on the driver's head. These straps come up and they hook on these little clips. As you're putting the clips on, just like that, you can see, pretend that the driver's sitting in there. As his head tries to go forward, it cannot. The reason it can is because that strap, with that strap on there, that keeps him from stretching his neck and potentially tearing a vertebrae or doing some other damage to his neck.
Yeah, I've got to say, of all the things that NASCAR and the tracks that they've done as far as safety for our drivers, especially ever since Dale Earnhardt Sr. was killed in the 2001 Daytona 500, that probably the head neck restraint device goes to the top of the charts. Yeah, safer barriers have been huge, the way the car is built, this energy absorbent foam, but I think the head neck restraint device has probably done more because we've seen drivers, I know Jeff Gordon has tested a lot of walls where there was not a safer barrier, but the good news, he had the head neck restraint device. Now, you can't just create a head neck restraint device and show up.
What in the world have you got on?
That's what I'm wondering,
I know I look
Larry.
like I'm about ready to parachute out of an airplane, but Jeff Hammond's the only guy that parachutes out of a perfectly good airplane.
And he'd probably look better than you in that.
Probably. There's
At least
a story
more
here.
tan.
But you can't just show up with a head neck restraint device. It has to be approved by NASCAR. Obviously, the Hans is one that a lot of drivers, but it's a lot about a driver preference. And what this is called the hybrid. And it actually becomes more, I think, a part of the driver's body. He fastens it on just like this. Now, you still have the tethers, just like on the Hans device, that pretty much hooks to the helmet. And then you have these right here. Just when you want to release, you just pull these almost like a ripcord, and that will release the tethers from the helmet. And this just pretty much stays on the driver. He puts this on before he ever gets into the race car.
And it's a little bit more mobile for the driver. So some of the drivers like that. With the Hans device, the driver kind of keeps his helmet and the Hans together. But one of the most important factors that you have to remember is how the Hans is actually mounted inside the race car. The shoulder straps come over the tops of these supports. The particular set of belts that we have inside the race car right now by Schroth are what's called an over-under belt. We talked about the shoulder straps, how they crest the driver's shoulder, collarbone, and chest area to come down into the abdomen where it's down there in the cam lock. Well, now on the Schroth, there's another small shoulder belt that goes over the top of it and capture this. So you've got the main harness that goes underneath and the smaller strap that goes over the top. And we'll try to get Danielle to put this on for us. She's going to have to get her head out of the way there a little bit. And we'll slide it down and so. Okay, so right there, it's sitting just on top of the shoulder belts themselves. So what you've got to do is slide this out, and you can see the 2-inch belt goes up over the top of it. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Just like that right there, perfect. And that's great. Now what you do, once you have it all squared away and you've got your lap belts tight, you grab a hold of these little cords here and you pull those tight. As you're pulling those down, that securely fastens the Hans device and keeps everything safe in there for the driver.
Yeah, I think Ryan Newman, really one of the first drivers when it became mandatory for the head neck restraint device and the Hans, because the hybrid, I don't even think had been created to that point. He just didn't feel comfortable without those shoulder harnesses pulling across his shoulders. It just made him uncomfortable, and that's where the people at Schroth came up with the over-under shoulder harnesses. Is one of the things I want to stress as far as lap belts, and it's the way they're mounted. When you mount this belt to the frame of the seat frame and you fasten this in right here and you pull it tight, you want to make sure that that lap belt is straight, that it's not in a bind, it's not twisted, it's not rubbing against the seat, because if that's the case, on an impact, it could do what we call the seat belt will dump. Pretty much the belt will tear. So you want to make sure that both lap belts, left and right, are straight when they're mounted and when you've got them pulled tight across your body.
What's so fascinating, guys, it may take a while to get hooked up, but when something's happening and a driver has to get out quickly, they really are able to. So show me how to get out of this thing.
It's really a pretty neat deal. And we've gotten this from the aviation. And what you do right there, twist that cam lock right there when you got everything right, and you can see the belts will just pop out.
Oh, wow.
Everything comes
All
straight
at
out.
once.
Everything comes out all at once, and you can get right out of the race car.
Yeah, there's two mechanisms approved by NASCAR, the cam lock mechanism or the latch lever, but whichever, it has to be able to release with one hand that's gloved.
Yep.
Always good to be safe, and we will wrap up NASCAR Performance when we get back and get the final thoughts on the Monster Mile. Stay with us.
Under the lights of Singapore, Lewis Hamilton's gearbox failure opened the door for Sebastian Vettel to race his way back into the title fight.
Yes! We did it!
Saturday, Suzuka stands at...
Before we go racing at Dover this weekend, why not ask the crew chief that won there earlier this year to leave us with a final tip?
Well, I think one thing you have to pay attention to going to Dover is the weather's very unpredictable. Up there on the East Coast, there's a lot of mist, a lot of rain. Your practice schedule might get shortened up a little bit, so I think you really have to rely heavily on your notes. And fortunately enough, we got some really good notes there, and I know that a lot of the guys that are in the chase have some good notes as well.
Yeah, and it's another one of those goofy schedules that I don't think none of us like, where the fact all the practice is on Friday and qualifying on Saturday. Win, lose, or draw, you're not going to have another one of those goofy hairdos, are you?
No, we're not. We're no funny hair this weekend. We've got a beautiful Lowe's Chevrolet going to the racetrack this weekend. We're excited about getting up there.
You guys are bringing the same car back to Dover that you won with earlier this year. Wish you the best of luck looking for that first win in the chase. See if the 48 can do it. Thanks so much for watching us here on NASCAR Performance. Come back and join us next week.